Evan Caldwell lost $82 million in port contracts, his family's name, and the last protected seat he had in Chicago's underworld because he spilled 1 cup of coffee on Nora Whitaker and laughed while it burned through her white waitress blouse. He thought she was just the biggest woman in the dining room, a soft, heavy, pale-skinned server taking up too much space between marble tables and men in tailored suits. He did not know she was the one weakness Luca Moretti had spent 2 years burying under silence, blood, and black money. By midnight, Caldwell Logistics would be locked out of every dock from Navy Pier to Calumet Harbor. By sunrise, Evan's father would be calling judges who no longer answered. And by the time the city's most dangerous men gathered behind the velvet doors of the Black Marigold, Evan would understand that he had not insulted a waitress. He had touched the wrong woman in front of the wrong king. 48 hours earlier, the restaurant still believed Nora was harmless. The Black Marigold glittered like a church built for sinners, all rose marble, brass rails, smoked mirrors, and chandeliers dripping warm light on plates that cost more than Nora's weekly rent. Men with gunmetal watches murmured over veal and red wine. Women in silk glanced at Nora's body the way people glanced at a chair placed too close to the aisle, something inconvenient, something to maneuver around. Nora felt every look. She had learned to feel them without flinching. At 29, she was a very large plus-size woman, full-hipped, broad, soft in ways the room judged before she ever opened her mouth. Her black skirt hugged her heavily rounded body. Her white blouse strained neatly across her chest, and each step carried a quiet, undeniable weight that made conversations pause for half a second before people pretended they had not stared. She did not shrink. She balanced 6 espresso cups on a silver tray, adjusted her shoulders, and moved through the narrow floor with the steady control of someone who had survived a lifetime of being told to become less. Table 7 says the big girl forgot their wine. One hostess whispered near the service station, "Not low enough." Nora picked up the Burlo without answering. Her face stayed calm, but behind her ribs something old tightened. A familiar wound. Too wide for the room. Too slow for the job. Too visible to be ignored. Too low status to be respected. Then the front doors opened, and the restaurant changed temperature. Luca Moretti entered without raising his voice, a white man in a black suit, so perfectly cut it looked like a threat. 2 bodyguards followed at a respectful distance, their eyes moving first, their hands never far from their jackets. The manager went pale. A senator at table 3 stopped mid-sentence. Even a piano player missed a note. Luca did not hurry. Men like him never did. He crossed the marble as if he owned the floor, the walls, the air above everyone's lungs. Nora saw him before he saw her, or maybe before he allowed anyone to know he had. Her fingers tightened once around the tray. Only once. At the far VIP table, Evan Caldwell leaned back with a smile too bright to be sincere, a gold watch flashing at his wrist, a sealed leather folder beside his plate. Nora noticed details because people forgot she was listening. Evan had ordered coffee but never touched it. His left cuff was damp though no water had spilled. The man beside him kept checking the emergency exit instead of the menu. Small things. Wrong things. Nora set the Burlo down at table 7 while the hostess smirked behind her. "Careful, sweetheart," Evan called across the room, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. These aisles weren't built for everybody. A few people laughed into their glasses. Nora felt heat crawl up her throat, but she lifted her chin, turned with her tray, and walked toward the espresso station. Luca's dark eyes moved, not to Evan, not to the laughing guests, but to Nora's hand as she passed the VIP table. Because beneath Evan Caldwell's untouched coffee cup, half hidden under a folded napkin, Nora had just seen a small steel USB engraved with the private mark of Luca Moretti's North Harbor route. The mark on a USB was so small most men in that room would have mistaken it for decoration. But Nora Whitaker had served enough liars to know when expensive things were hiding ugly secrets. 3 short lines cut into steel, a crescent beneath them. The private symbol Luca Moretti's people used for North Harbor cargo. Her pulse kicked once hard, but her hand did not shake. She slid the wine bottle into place at table 7, accepted the hostess's irritated glare, and turned back toward the service station as if she had seen nothing at all. That was Nora's gift. Not beauty, according to rooms like this. Not grace, according to women who measured grace by how little space a body occupied. Her gift was control. She could carry scalding porcelain across crowded marble while men leaned back to make her path narrower. She could feel a dozen eyes dragging over her broad hips, her soft stomach, the heavy sway of her body under the tight black uniform, and still remember who ordered decaf, who lied about his reservation, and whose hands were too clean for a man claiming he came from the docks. Nora, the manager hissed from behind the espresso machine. VIP section needs water, not a lecture in slow motion. A busboy snickered. The hostess looked at Nora's waist, then at the slim gap between two velvet chairs. Maybe send Marcus. It's tight over there. The words landed softly enough to avoid sounding cruel, but everyone heard what she meant. Nora was too large for the important side of the room, too visible for polished men, too embarrassing beside money. For 1 second, the old instinct rose in her, the need to apologize for existing in full size, to turn sideways, to make herself smaller for people who would never make room. Instead, Nora lifted the silver pitcher, squared her heavy shoulders, and walked straight through the gap without touching a single chair. The movement was slow, controlled, almost regal. Conversation thinned as she passed. A woman in pearls pulled her purse closer to her lap. Evan Caldwell watched with open amusement, one finger still resting on the coffee cup he had not drunk. Luca Moretti watched without expression. That was worse. Better. Nora couldn't tell. His dark eyes tracked the pitcher in her hand, then the folded napkin near Evan's plate, then the sealed leather folder. He saw patterns the way wolves smell blood, but Nora saw something he didn't. Evan's companion, the nervous man by the emergency exit, had ordered sparkling water with lime. When Nora poured from the clear bottle, he covered his glass too quickly, palm flat, cuffs sliding back just enough to reveal a fresh burn mark shaped like a shipping seal. Not a kitchen burn, not an accident, a dock brand. Nora lowered the pitcher. "Sir," she said gently, her voice calm enough to sound harmless. "Would you prefer still water instead?" The man blinked. "What? You haven't touched anything carbonated tonight." A tiny silence opened around the VIP table. Evan's smile sharpened. "She keeps track of bubbles now." Impressive. A few guests laughed again, but Luca did not. His bodyguard on the left shifted his weight, as if hearing an order no one had spoken. Nora felt the heat of humiliation climb her neck, yet she kept her eyes on the nervous man's glass. There was a faint, oily shimmer on the surface where nothing should have been. Wrong bottle, wrong hand, wrong table. She stepped back, lowering her gaze like a good waitress, but inside her mind, every detail locked into place. Evan's untouched coffee, the hidden USB, the burned wrist, the man avoiding his own drink. She was not supposed to notice any of it. That was why they had stopped fearing her. Because women like Nora were either stared at or looked through, and both made men careless. As she turned away, her hip brushed the edge of Luca's chair, just barely. She whispered the only warning she could risk. "Don't drink from this table." Luca did not move. He did not answer. But the room seemed to hold its breath as his eyes lifted to Nora's face. And for the first time that night, he looked at her like the waitress had just become the most dangerous person in the restaurant. And Nora felt the full weight of that attention settle over her skin like a black silk coat she had not asked to wear. Luca Moretti did not turn his head. He did not reach for a weapon. He simply lifted 2 fingers from the table, and the entire room obeyed a command no one had heard. His left bodyguard moved 3 steps toward the emergency exit. His right one drifted behind Evan Caldwell's chair. The manager stopped breathing near the espresso machine. Even the hostess who had just smirked at Nora suddenly found the floor fascinating. That was power, Nora realized again. Not noise, not rage. The ability to make a room rearrange itself around your silence. Luca's eyes stayed on hers for 1 heartbeat too long, then lowered to the water glass she had warned him about. "Replace everything on this table," he said. His voice was quiet, almost bored, but every waiter in the restaurant moved as if a gun had gone off. Evan laughed, too late and too sharply. "Careful, Moretti. Letting staff dictate your dinner now." The joke landed badly. Nobody joined him this time. Nora stepped forward with a fresh tray before anyone could order her to, because standing still under rich men's judgment had never saved her. Her hips brushed the edge of a velvet chair as she reached for the contaminated glass, and the woman seated behind her made a tiny sound of annoyance, as if Nora's body itself had offended the architecture. "Maybe they should widen the service lanes," the woman murmured into her wine. "Or hire girls who fit the room." Nora's fingers tightened around the stem of the glass. The words cut, but they did not scatter her. She had spent years carrying hot plates through spaces designed to shame her into apology. Tonight, she kept her shoulders square, her breath even, her face soft and unreadable. She lifted the glass without spilling a drop. Luca saw that too. He saw the insult enter her body and fail to make her bow. He saw how her large, steady frame held the tray level while thinner hands around her trembled. Evan's companion shifted again, trying to hide his burned wrist beneath the table. Nora lowered her gaze, playing invisible, and noticed the leather folder beside Evan's plate had been turned upside down. Not carelessly, deliberately. The brass corner stamp read C-17, but North Harbor shipments never used C-Series routing after midnight. They used en routes, unless someone wanted Luca's men waiting at the wrong pier. Nora placed a clean glass in front of Luca, then angled the old one onto her tray so the oily shimmer caught the chandelier light for half a second. Just long enough. Luca's eyes flicked to it, then to Evan's folder, then back to Nora. Something passed between them that was not romance yet, not trust yet, but recognition sharpened into interest. A king realizing the woman everyone kept underestimating could read the battlefield from below table height. "Your waitress is dramatic," Evan said, smiling wider now, trying to reclaim the room. She bumps into chairs, whispers at guests, stares at private documents. Maybe she needs a break, or a smaller job. The manager stepped forward instantly, desperate to bleed blame away from power. Nora apologized to Mr. Caldwell. Heat moved through the restaurant, not from the lamps, from everyone watching to see whether the big waitress would lower herself on command. Nora looked at Evan, then at the untouched coffee beside his hand, his fingers slowly circling the rim as if measuring timing. Luca leaned back in his chair, silent again, but his gaze had turned lethal in its stillness. Evan stood, lifted the coffee cup with a lazy smile, and said, "No, let her come closer. I want to see if she can serve without making a scene." Evan stood with the coffee cup lifted just high enough for the room to understand there was no accident coming, only theater. Nora saw it in his smile before his wrist even moved. She saw the little audience he had built around her, the pearls turning, the wine glasses pausing, the manager's face tightening with the cowardly hope that if she endured the insult quietly enough, the rich man would leave a generous tip, and no one important would have to feel uncomfortable. "Come here," Evan said, soft and bright and cruel. "Let's see if you can serve without taking up the whole aisle." Nora's breath caught for half a second. Not visibly, not enough for anyone else to claim victory. She stepped forward because she was working, because rent did not care about dignity, because women like her learned early that refusing a small humiliation could cost an entire paycheck. Her large body moved between the velvet chairs with careful control, shoulders squared, tray balanced, chin level. The room watched the way people watched a glass wobble at the edge of table, waiting for the crash. Luca Moretti watched differently. He did not blink. His hand rested beside his untouched glass, perfectly still, but the tendon in his jaw flexed once. Nora reached for the empty plate near Evan's right hand. That was when he tilted the cup. Hot black coffee spilled across the front of her white blouse, blooming fast over her chest and down the soft curve of her stomach. The heat bit through cotton. Someone gasped. Someone else laughed too quickly, then buried it inside a cough. Nora's fingers closed around the edge of the tray, so hard the silver bent beneath her thumb. Pain flashed through her, sharp and intimate. But worse than the burn was the silence after it. The whole room deciding whether she was a person or a mess to be cleaned. Evan looked her up and down, his mouth curving. "There," he said. "Now the uniform finally matches the service. Cheap, stained, and impossible to miss." A woman near the window gave a small, delighted snort. The hostess looked away. The manager stepped toward Nora with panic instead of compassion. "Nora, don't make this worse," he whispered, as if she had poured the coffee on herself. Evan leaned closer, lowering his voice just enough to make the words feel private, while keeping them sharp enough for the VIP table. "You should know your place. Men like Moretti don't choose women like you. They hide them, use them, maybe feel sorry for them on lonely nights. But they do not bring them into rooms where power is decided." The sentence entered Nora deeper than the heat. For one trembling second, the restaurant blurred into every old hallway, every rejected dress, every man who had smiled in secret and looked away in public. Her throat tightened. Her eyes burned. Then she inhaled once, slow and heavy, and the softness in her face hardened into something quiet enough to frighten the few people paying attention. "Would you like a towel, sir?" she asked, voice low but steady. Or just an audience?" The laugh died in Evan's mouth. Lucas set his knife down. Not hard, not loud, but the sound carried through the restaurant like a door locking underground. His bodyguards did not move, yet both of them had gone still in the particular way armed men went still before violence. Nora lowered her gaze to the ruined tray, pretending to gather the spilled cup, the wet napkin, the shattered dignity everyone expected her to leave on the floor. And then she saw it. The coffee had soaked through the folded napkin beside Evan's plate, flattening the cloth just enough to expose the small steel USB hidden beneath it. No bigger than a bullet, its engraved North Harbor mark caught the chandelier light at Nora's feet. Evan saw her see it. His smile vanished. He reached for her wrist, fingers closing too hard around her skin, and whispered, "Touch that, fat girl, and I'll tell everyone you stole from me." Nora did not move. Luca did not speak. The entire room held its breath, waiting to see whether the burned waitress would lower her eyes or make the first mistake Evan could never take back. Nora did not lower her eyes. She felt Evan's fingers biting into her wrist, felt the coffee burning cold against her blouse now, felt every stare in the room waiting for her to panic, to apologize, to become exactly as small as they needed her to be. Instead, she planted her feet, not delicately, not with the nervous shuffle of a woman trying to disappear. She set her full weight into the marble floor, broad shoulders steady, soft, heavy body suddenly immovable in a way that made Evan's grip look foolish. He pulled once, expecting her to stumble. Nora did not move. The silver tray in her other hand tilted, but only because she wanted it to. "Sir," she said, her voice quiet enough to make people lean in. "You're hurting me." Evan's smile twitched. "Then stop reaching for things that don't belong to you." "I'm not reaching." Nora looked at his hand wrapped around her wrist. "You are." The words landed harder than a shout. A few guests stopped smiling. The hostess's mouth parted, then closed. Evan tightened his fingers, but Nora used the movement. She let the edge of the tray dip, sending a slow black ribbon of spilled coffee across the marble toward the exposed USB. Half the table recoiled from the mess. Evan cursed and shifted back to save his expensive shoes. In that half-second, Nora stepped forward, not away, using the size they mocked to block the room's view with her body. Her hip brushed the table, solid and controlled, nudging the soaked napkin over the steel drive before Evan could snatch it. To everyone else, it looked like a clumsy waitress trying to clean the disaster. To Luca Moretti, it looked like a woman building a wall out of humiliation. Nora pulled her wrist free, not violently, but with a grounded twist learned from years of carrying overloaded trays while drunk men grabbed for her elbow. Evan's balance broke before hers did. His shoulder hit the back of his chair. The sound was small, but the silence after it was not. "Careful, Mr. Caldwell," Nora said, still calm, still professional, still stained. "These aisles weren't built for everybody." The same people who had laughed at her earlier now looked down at their plates. Evan's face flushed dark. The manager moved toward her again, angry now because she had embarrassed the wrong man without raising her voice. "Nora, enough. Go clean yourself up." "I will," she said, after I clear contaminated items from the table. She picked up the wet napkin with serving tongs, folding the USB inside it as if collecting broken glass. Her hand never touched the drive. Her eyes never left the tray. But as she turned, she angled the folded cloth beneath a spoon, just enough for the engraved North Harbor mark to flash once under the chandelier. Lucas saw it. His expression did not change, and that was how Nora knew it mattered. Evan saw him see it. Panic cracked through his rich boy confidence. "She stole something," he snapped too quickly. "Check her pockets." The accusation hit the room like a match thrown into gasoline. Nora froze for the first time, not from guilt, but from calculation. If she argued, Evan could make it about her. If she ran, he could make it proof. So she did neither. She carried the tray to Luca's side of the table and set it down with the quiet precision of a church offering. Then she reached for a clean white towel and folded it into the same triangle she had used 2 years ago in a locked wine room, when Luca Moretti had been bleeding through his shirt, and trusting her was the only reason he lived. His dark eyes dropped to the towel, then to the USB hidden beneath the wet napkin, then to Nora's burned blouse, her steady hands, her chin still lifted though the room had tried to drag it down. For the first time all night, Lucas spoke her name. "Miss Whitaker." Every whisper died. Evan stopped breathing. Nora turned slowly toward the most dangerous man in Chicago, and Luca asked, softly enough to terrify the entire restaurant, "What did you just save me from? What did you just save me from?" Luca asked, and the question did not sound like gratitude. It sounded like a test with a grave already dug for the wrong answer. Nora stood beside his table in her coffee-stained blouse, the burns still pulsing across her skin, the wet tray between them like evidence on an altar. Every eye in the black marigold had turned toward her now, not with kindness, not yet with respect, but with the uncomfortable fear that the woman they had just watched be humiliated might know something none of them did. Evan Caldwell went pale around the mouth. "This is absurd," he snapped. "She's a waitress playing spy because she got embarrassed." Luca did not look at him. "I asked her." 2 words. Quiet. Final. The manager stopped halfway through opening his mouth. Nora swallowed once. Her voice came out low, steady, still professional enough to make the cruelty around her look cheap. Not from the coffee. A ripple moved through the room. From the table. Luca's eyes darkened, but he gave her nothing. "No rescue. No pras. Only space to prove herself." "Explain." Nora looked down at the tray, because looking directly at Luca Moretti for too long felt like standing too close to a locked furnace. Mr. Caldwell ordered coffee and never drank it. His companion ordered sparkling water, but covered the glass before I poured. The folder on the table is marked C17, but after midnight your North Harbor routes don't use C-series numbers. Evan barked a laugh, but it broke at the end. Nora kept going, and the man by the exit has a fresh Doc brand burn on his wrist. Not from kitchen equipment, from a seal press. The bodyguard behind, Evan's chair shifted so slightly most people missed it. Luca did not. Nora did. "There it is," she said softly. Luca's gaze cut to his own man, then back to her. For the first time, the silence around the table changed shape. It was no longer waiting to see if Nora would be punished. It was waiting to see who else she had noticed. Luca leaned back, one hand resting near the knife he had set down earlier. "Why hide the drive in a napkin instead of handing it to me?" Nora's fingers tightened around the towel, then relaxed. That was the real test. Not what she saw. Why she chose silence. Because if I gave it to you too fast, whoever planted it would know I understood it. If I called it out, Mr. Caldwell would accuse me of stealing, and your men would search me instead of the table. If I ran, I'd be guilty. So I made sure you saw it without letting him take it back. The words landed with quiet force. A waitress had just described the room's power structure better than the men paid to control it. Someone in the back whispered her name like they were hearing it for the first time. The hostess stared at the bent silver tray in Nora's hand, then at Nora's broad, steady body, as if the thing she had mocked for taking up space had just become the only reason the truth had somewhere to hide. Evan's confidence cracked into anger. She's lying. Luca finally turned his head toward him. No, he said. She's observant. The correction was small, almost gentle, and somehow more dangerous than a threat. Then Luca reached for the clean towel Nora had folded and placed it over her burned wrist, not touching her skin, not claiming tenderness in front of wolves, but shielding the red mark from the room's appetite. No one questions Miss Whitaker without my permission. The manager lowered his eyes. Evan's jaw clenched. Nora felt the shift like a door opening beneath her feet. Not safety, something sharper. Usefulness. Trust, maybe in its most dangerous infant form. Then Luca's right bodyguard received a message, read it, and went still. He bent to Luca's ear, but Nora caught 2 words before the whisper disappeared. North exit. Luca's face emptied of expression. Across the room, the nervous man by the emergency door slipped one hand inside his jacket. Luca stood slowly, placing himself between Nora and the table without making it look like protection. Miss Whitaker, he said, his voice low enough that only she and the killers nearest them could hear. You stay where I can see you. You stay where I can see you, Lucas said, and Nora understood immediately that it was not a request, not exactly an order, but the kind of warning men like him gave when death had already entered the room and chosen a direction. The nervous man by the emergency door drew his hand out of his jacket. Metal flashed. Luca's bodyguard moved first, slamming him into the wall before the gun could clear fabric. But the sound of the struggle cracked the restaurant open. Chairs scraped. A woman screamed. Evan Caldwell backed away from the table, his face slick with panic and rage, realizing the power he had borrowed was slipping out of his hands in front of everyone who mattered. Luca did not grab Nora. He stepped beside her, close enough that his black suit brushed the edge of her stained blouse, then angled his body between her and the room with such quiet precision that no one could call it tenderness and survive the lie. Kitchen, he said. One word, and the route opened. His left bodyguard took point. The right one stayed behind them. Staff scattered out of Nora's path, not with the annoyed little movements they had used all night, but quickly, nervously, like her body now carried consequence. Nora felt that shift in the marrow of her bones. The same hips they had mocked moved through the service corridor without apology. Her broad shoulders did not fold inward. Her soft, heavy body filled the narrow hallway, solid and breathing and alive, and for once the world moved around her instead of demanding she vanish. In the kitchen back office, Luca locked the door behind them, and the roar of the restaurant became a muffled animal outside the walls. The room was small, crowded with security monitors, wine invoices, a steel desk, and one flickering lamp. Forced this close, Nora could smell cedar, gun oil, and expensive soap beneath the bloodless calm of him. He removed his jacket and held it out. Put it on. Nora looked at the black fabric, then at his face. I'm burned, not helpless. Something unreadable moved through his eyes. Not anger. Respect, sharpened by surprise. I didn't say you were. Then don't make me look like your damage control. For 3 seconds, nobody breathed. Outside, men shouted in Italian. Inside, Luca Moretti lowered the jacket. Not because she refused him, but because she had drawn a line and he had recognized it. Fair, he said. The word was quiet enough to feel intimate and dangerous at the same time. He turned to the security monitor and pointed at the frozen image of the dining room. Tell me who doesn't belong. Nora should have laughed. She was a waitress with coffee drying against her skin, standing beside the most feared white mafia boss in Chicago while armed men hunted whatever she had found. Instead, she stepped closer to the monitors. Not behind him, beside him. Luca noticed. So did the bodyguard at the door, whose eyes flicked from Nora's stained uniform to Luca's silent permission and then lowered with sudden respect. On screen, Evan was arguing with the manager. The hostess was crying near the bar. 2 servers huddled by the wine cage. Nora scanned the chaos the way she scanned a dinner rush, not for drama, but for rhythm. There, she said, tapping the screen. Marcus isn't scared. Luca's eyes narrowed. The busboy. He dropped a tray last week when a customer raised his voice. Tonight there's a gun in the restaurant, and he's checking the south hallway camera instead of running. Luca leaned in, his shoulder nearly touching hers. You're sure? Nora looked at him then, calm despite the burn, despite the humiliation still drying on her body. I'm a waitress. I know what fear looks like when people stop pretending. That was the trust beat. Not soft, not romantic enough to be safe. Luca reached into the desk drawer, took out a small brass keycard, and placed it on the table between them. Security archive. Only managers have access. I'm not a manager. Tonight, you're better. The words hit Nora harder than Evan's insult, because they did not flatter her body or pity her pain. They recognized her use, her mind, her survival. Before she could answer, every monitor went black. The office lights flickered once, then died. In the dark, Luca's phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. Give US the waitress, or the drive goes public with your dead men on it. Outside the locked door, someone inserted a key. The key turned in the lock, and Nora moved before fear could decide for her. She did not scream. She did not step behind Luca like the room expected a woman like her to do. She threw her full weight against the office door just as it cracked open, shoulders slamming into the wood with a deep, brutal thud that rattled the steel desk. The man outside cursed as the door crushed his hand against the frame. Nora felt the impact bloom through her broad body, felt her burned blouse pull against her skin, felt the old shame of being called too big twist into something colder and stronger. Too big to fit their idea of a waitress. Too big to erase. Too solid to move when death wanted in. Luca was beside her instantly, gun drawn but not fired, his eyes cutting from her braced shoulder to the black monitors. Nora. One word, sharp with something almost uncontrolled. Archive key, she said through clenched teeth. Now, he did not question her. That was the shift. The most dangerous man in Chicago handed her the brass keycard before he handed orders to his own men. Nora shoved the door closed with one last heavy push, and Luca's bodyguard jammed a chair onto the handle. Someone slammed against it from the other side. The whole office shook. Nora moved to the security console, fingers steady despite the tremor in her wrist where Evan had grabbed her. The screens didn't die, she said. They were cut to black from inside the system. Whoever sent that message has manager access. Luca's face went still. Marcus. Not just Marcus. Nora swiped the keycard, then hesitated at the password prompt. The bodyguard cursed behind her as the door buckled another inch. Luca stepped closer, heat and danger at her back. Can you open it? Nora looked at the invoices pinned beside the monitor. Wine deliveries, staff schedules, table reservations, numbers everyone saw and no one respected. Her eyes stopped on the hostess's handwritten note beside Evan's VIP booking. C17. South hallway. Midnight. They use the route code as the password, she whispered, because they think staff don't read. She typed in 17, Marigold. The system opened. Luca's silence sharpened into awe he would never name. Camera feeds flashed alive, not from the restaurant floor, but from the archive server. Evan in the south hallway, handing Marcus an envelope. Marcus scanning a clone manager card. Evan's burned wrist companion uploading a mirrored file from the USB before hiding the physical drive under the napkin. The message suddenly made sense. The USB was not the evidence. It was the key to a mirrored blackmail package already waiting to detonate across Luca's docks. He planned to frame your men, Norris said. Bodies, routes, timestamps. If you killed him tonight, the files would make you look guilty by morning. The bodyguard stared at her like the floor had opened. Outside the door, the pounding stopped. That was worse. Nora switched camera angles and saw why. Evan stood in the dining room with one arm around the young hostess's throat, using her as a shield, his perfect hair ruined, his face wild with the terror of a man losing inherited power in real time. Bring me the drive, Evan shouted toward the kitchen corridor, voice cracking through the restaurant speakers. Or I start telling everyone what Moretti keeps hidden. Nora looked at the screen, then at Luca. His eyes were no longer cold. They were black fire. But he waited. He waited for her. Nora reached for the intercom, her large, steady body filling the chair like it had always belonged in the center of command. "No," she said, and her voice carried through every speaker in the Black Marigold. "You don't get to use another woman as cover because you underestimated the first one." Then she hit play on the archive footage, and the dining room monitors lit up with Evan Caldwell's betrayal for everyone to see. The dining room monitors lit up with Evan Caldwell's betrayal for everyone to see. And for the first time all night, the rich men stopped pretending they were too important to be afraid. Footage rolled across every screen above the bar. Evan passing the envelope to Marcus. Marcus cloning the manager card. The burned wrist man uploading the mirror blackmail file. The steel USB sliding beneath the folded napkin like a bullet waiting for a trigger. The young hostess froze under Evan's arm, tears streaking her makeup, while the same guests who had laughed at Nora's stained blouse now stared at Evan as if he had dragged dirt across their own dinner plates. "Turn it off," Evan shouted, but his voice cracked. "That woman is lying. She set me up." Nora stepped out from the kitchen corridor before Luca could stop her. Her blouse was still stained, her wrist still marked, her large body still carrying the evidence of every insult the room had permitted. But she did not look ruined. She looked impossible to erase. She walked into the dining room slowly, heavily, deliberately, and people moved. Not because she squeezed through them, because they stepped aside. "Let her go," Nora said. Evan jerked the hostess tighter against him. "You don't give orders here." Nora's eyes dropped to his hand, then to the monitor behind him. "No," she said calmly. "But your father's bank just froze your emergency line. Your doc access code expired 3 minutes ago. And every man in this room just watched you sell a route you didn't own." The silence that followed was more brutal than shouting. Lucas stood behind Nora now, not in front of her, letting the room understand the difference. He was not saving a helpless waitress. He was backing the woman who had already changed the board. He lifted his phone once. "Caldwell Logistics is finished at my ports." One sentence. $82 million vanished from Evan's future. A senator at table 3 lowered his eyes. An underboss who had spent the evening laughing into his wine pushed his chair away from Evan's side of the room. Even the manager took a step back, choosing survival over loyalty. Evan looked around for support and found only polished marble, dead screens, and people who no longer wanted his name attached to theirs. The hostess slipped from his loosened arm and ran toward the bar. Evan did not chase her. He was too busy watching his empire leave his body. "You can't do this because of her," he said, pointing at Nora with a shaking hand. "She's nobody." Luca moved then. Not fast, not loud. He came to Nora's side and placed the brass security key card into her palm, closing her fingers around it with a gesture so public the whole restaurant seemed to inhale. "No," he said. "She's the reason I am still standing." Nora's throat tightened, but she did not look down. Not this time. Evan's face twisted. "You're choosing a fat waitress over a family alliance?" Nora felt the old wound open one last time, but this time it had nowhere to live. The room had changed around it. Luca's eyes went flat and lethal. "I'm choosing the woman who saw what my soldiers missed, held her ground while you burned her, and gave this room a chance to learn respect before I taught it fear." Then he turned to the manager. "Apologize." The man went pale. "Mr. Moretti," I to her. Every head turned. The manager faced Nora, shaking. The hostess lowered her eyes. The woman in pearls who had joked about hiring girls who fit the room set her wine down without making a sound. "I'm sorry, Miss Whitaker," the manager whispered. Nora looked at him, then at Evan, then at the room that had waited all night for her to shrink. "Do better than sorry," she said. "Make sure no woman who works here ever has to be humiliated to be believed." Luca's expression changed so slightly only Nora could have seen it. Pride, maybe. Hunger, maybe. Something darker and softer than both. 2 weeks later, the Black Marigold reopened with new owners, new security, and one new rule. No deal entered the VIP floor without Nora Whitaker's approval. She arrived beside Luca Moretti in deep red velvet, her full figure moving under chandelier light with the calm gravity of a woman who had stopped apologizing for the space she claimed. Men who once looked through her now stood when she entered. Women who once smirked lowered their eyes. The same marble floor that had held her humiliation now carried her crown. Luca offered his arm, not to steady her, but to show the city where power stood. "This is Miss Whitaker," he said to the underworld gathered before them. "The only woman in this room I trust to see the truth." And Nora, soft, strong, unhidden, took her place at his right hand while every door in Chicago opened for her first. If this moment gave you chills like the video, subscribe for more dark mafia romance stories and comment which scene hit you hardest. Nora standing her ground, Evan losing everything, or Luca finally showing the room who she was.